Hey there, and welcome to the Magic Snail channel. This is where we share real life stories about people dealing with all kinds of situations. Some are funny, some are messy, and some are downright unbelievable. If you like hearing stories that feel real and keep you curious, you'll feel right at home here. So go ahead, like the video, and subscribe to the channel if you want more. We've got plenty of stories waiting for you.
I'm not here for revenge. I'm here for justice.
The wallet fell out of Wyatt's pack like a dead bird hitting dirt. I watched him scramble to stuff it back, but not before I saw what tumbled out. A photo of my wife Rachel, the same photo I'd given her on our wedding day. The one where she's laughing, head thrown back, wearing that blue dress I bought her in Denver. "Cal, you see anything?" Wyatt whispered, shouldering his rifle. "Nothing," I said, but my hands were shaking as I gripped my M4. We were 2 clicks from the Serbian border, deep in forest that smelled like pine needles and old death. Black Ops patrol, just the two of us in silence. But now the silence felt different, poisoned. Wyatt Briggs had been my best friend for 12 years. We'd joined the army together, deployed together, saved each other more times than I could count. He was supposed to be watching my six, not carrying photos of my wife. "Movement, 2 o'clock," Wyatt hissed. I swung my tool right, scanning the tree line. Nothing but shadows and the distant sound of rushing water. My heart hammered against my Kevlar vest. "You sure?" I asked. "Positive." 3 tangos, maybe 4. I adjusted my scope, finger hovering over the trigger. The photo burned in my mind like acid. How long had he been carrying it? How long had they been? The first shot cracked through the air like a whip. Muzzle flashes lit up the forest like lightning. "Contact left!" I shouted, diving behind a fallen log. Bullets chewed bark above my head. I could hear Wyatt cursing somewhere to my right, his rifle chattering in short bursts. The guerrilla fighters had us pinned down good, at least 6 of them, maybe more. "Cal!" Wyatt's voice, high and tight with pain. "I'm hit." I risked a look. He was 30 yards away, clutching his shoulder. His rifle lay in the dirt beside him. A choice crystallized in that moment. Help my best friend, my brother in arms, or let the forest take him. The photo flashed in my mind again. Rachel's laugh, the way she'd been distant lately, cold when I called from base. The way she always asked about Wyatt. "Cal, please." Another burst of shots. I made my decision. I low-crawled backwards, away from Wyatt, towards the extraction point. Every instinct screamed at me to help him, but something darker had taken hold. Something that tasted like betrayal. "Cal, don't leave me." His voice faded as I melted into the trees. This continued for another minute, then stopped. In the sudden quiet, I heard footsteps, foreign voices. They had him. I reached the extraction point 40 minutes later, alone. The local contact found me at dawn, smoking by the abandoned church where we'd arranged the pickup. Milan was maybe 60, with hands like gnarled wood and eyes that had seen too much. "Your friend," he said in broken English. "The big one with yellow hair." "What about him?" Milan spat in the dirt. "He make deal with them 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. Trade tool coordinates for American dollars." The cigarette turned to ash between my fingers. "You're lying." "No lie. I see him myself talking with their commander. They take him alive, yes, but not as prisoner." Milan's smile was bitter. "As, how you say, asset." My stomach dropped into my boots. "Asset. Not dead, not captured. Working for them." "Where?" "They move him north to safe house in Pristina." "New identity? New papers?" Milan pulled out a crumpled photograph, Wyatt shaking hands with a man in military fatigues. "Your government, they know nothing of this, yes?" I stared at the photo until my eyes burned. "No, they know nothing." The extraction helicopter found us an hour later. I climbed aboard and didn't look back at the forest, but I could still hear Wyatt's voice in my head, begging me not to leave him. Except now I wondered if it had all been an act. Rachel was washing dishes when I walked through the front door. She didn't turn around, just kept scrubbing the same plate over and over. Her shoulders were tense under her blue sweater, the one I'd bought her for Christmas. "You're early," she said to the sink. "Mission got cut short." I dropped my duffel bag by the door. "Where's Jessie?" "Upstairs, doing homework." I waited for her to turn around, to smile, to do something that resembled the woman I'd married. Instead, she set the plate in the drying rack and started on another one. Rachel. I heard about Wyatt. Her voice was flat, distant. I'm sorry. Sorry. Like he was a stranger, not the man who'd been to our house dozens of times, who'd helped me build Jesse's treehouse, who'd been the best man at our wedding. How did you? His mother called. She got word from the army. Rachel finally turned around and I saw something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Relief. I told Jessie. She took it hard. That was a lie. I could hear Jessie's music upstairs, the same pop garbage she always played. No tears, no grieving, just another Tuesday night in suburban Colorado. I need a beer, I said. There's some in the fridge. I opened a Coors and leaned against the counter, studying my wife. 17 years of marriage, and suddenly she felt like a stranger. Her auburn hair was shorter than I remembered, styled different. When had she changed it? You get a haircut? A few weeks ago. She turned back to the dishes. You like it? I didn't answer because I was thinking about the photo in Wyatt's wallet, about Milan's words, about the way Rachel's hands were shaking as she scrubbed. Cal? Yeah, it looks good, but everything else looked wrong. I found the letter 3 days later buried in Rachel's jewelry box under a tangle of earrings. Genetics Laboratory of Colorado. The letterhead was official, intimidating. My hands shook as I unfolded it. Dear Mrs. Dawson, thank you for submitting samples for paternity testing. Results are as follows. Probability of paternity between Calvin Dawson and Jessica Dawson, 0.00%. Calvin Dawson is excluded as the biological father. Rachel's signature was at the bottom, dated 2 years ago. 2 freaking years. I sat on our bed, staring at the paper until the words blurred together. Jessie wasn't mine. Had never been mine. 18 years of bedtime story, soccer games, helping with math homework, all of it built on a lie. The bedroom door creaked. I looked up to find Jessie standing in the doorway, home from school. She was tall for 16, with dark hair and green eyes that looked nothing like mine. How had I never noticed? You found it, she said. No surprise in her voice. No shock. You knew. Mom told me last year. Jessie leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She looked older than 16 in that moment. Harder. We figured you'd find out eventually. My daughter, not my daughter, stared at me with eyes full of something I couldn't name. Pity, maybe, or disgust. Who? The word came out as a croak. Does it matter? It did matter. It mattered more than anything in the world. But looking at Jessie's face, I realized she wasn't going to tell me. Neither was Rachel. I was alone in my own house, surrounded by strangers wearing familiar faces. I cornered Jessie in the garage 2 days later, while Rachel was at work. She was sitting on the workbench, texting someone on her phone. When she saw me, her expression didn't change. No guilt, no remorse, just mild annoyance. We need to talk, I said. About what? About the fact that you've been lying to me for 16 years. Jessie set down her phone and looked at me with those green eyes. Eyes that belonged to someone else. I haven't been lying about anything. You just didn't know the truth. Same thing. No, it's not. She hopped down from the workbench, suddenly animated. A lie is when you tell someone something that isn't true. I never told you that you were my father. You just assumed. The words hit me like a physical blow. I staggered backwards, bumping into my tool chest. Jessie, you want to know the truth, Cal? Her voice was cold, clinical. We were hoping you'd die out there, Mom and me. We talked about it all the time. How much easier things would be if you just didn't come back. The garage spun around me. I gripped the workbench to keep from falling. You don't mean that. Sure I do. Jessie picked up her phone again, thumbs flying across the screen. You were never my dad. You just didn't know it. And honestly, I'm glad you finally figured it out. Now maybe we can stop pretending. She walked past me toward the door, then paused. Oh, and Cal? Mom's been seeing someone. Has been for years. Just thought you should know. The garage door slammed shut, leaving me alone with the echo of her words and the taste of bile in my throat. I started digging that night. Rachel's laptop was password protected, but she'd always been careless about security. I tried her birthday, our anniversary, Jessie's birthday. Nothing. Then I tried Wyatt's birthday. The screen unlocked. My hands were steady as I scrolled through her emails. Most were routine, work stuff, appointments, conversations with friends. But buried in a folder labeled MISC, I found something that made my stomach turn. Dozens of emails to an address I didn't recognize. samdavis2981@protonmail.com. The messages were encrypted, but the timestamps told a story. The first one was dated 3 years ago. The most recent was from last week. I opened the banking app next. Our joint checking account looked normal, but there was a link to another account I'd never seen before. A business account under Rachel's maiden name, funded by regular transfers from our savings. $40,000. Gone. I screenshot everything, saved it to a thumb drive, then covered my tracks. When Rachel came home from work an hour later, I was watching TV in the living room like nothing had happened. "How was your day?" she asked, not looking at me. "Fine." "Yours?" "Same as always." But nothing was the same. Nothing would ever be the same again. The call came at 0300, sharp and sudden in the darkness. "Cal?" The voice was familiar, rough with cigarettes and bad sleep. "It's Nate Torres." From the 82nd, I sat up in bed, careful not to wake Rachel. "Nate, Jesus, what time is it?" "Late. Listen, I got some information about Wyatt. Information you need to hear." I slipped out of bed and padded to the kitchen, phone pressed to my ear. "What kind of information?" "The kind that gets people ended if they talk about it over unsecured lines." Nate's voice was grim. "Meet me tomorrow. Denny's on Colfax, noon. Come alone." The line went dead. I stared at the phone for a long moment, then looked up to find Rachel standing in the doorway. Her hair was messed, but her eyes were alert. Too alert for someone who'd just woken up. "Who was that?" she asked. "Wrong number." "At 3 in the morning. Drunk dial. You know how it is." I moved past her toward the bedroom. "Go back to sleep." But I knew she wouldn't, just like I knew she'd probably been awake the whole time, listening to every word. The next morning, I drove to Denny's through a maze of side streets, checking my mirrors every few blocks. Nate was already there, hunched over black coffee in a corner booth. He looked older than I remembered, gray creeping into his dark hair. "You look like heck," he said when I sat down. "Feel worse." "What do you know about Wyatt?" Nate glanced around the restaurant, then leaned forward. "He's alive, Cal. Not just alive, active. Working for a private contractor in Idaho, running tactical training for militia groups." My coffee turned cold in my hands. "You're sure?" "Saw him myself 2 weeks ago. He's using the name Sam Davis now, but it's him. Same ugly face, same cocky attitude." Nate pulled out his phone, showed me a blurry photo. Compound outside Boise. Real professional operation. It was Wyatt. Older, bearded, but definitely him. Standing next to a black SUV with Idaho plates. "Oh, there's more," Nate said. "Word is he's connected to some heavy hitters. CIA types, contractors with alphabet soup clearances. Someone's protecting him. Any idea who? Working on it, but Cal?" Nate's eyes were serious. "Whatever you're thinking of doing, be careful. These aren't the kind of people who leave loose ends." I pocketed my phone and stood up. "Thanks for the warning. Cal." I turned back. For what it's worth, I never bought the story about him being KIA. Wyatt was too smart to get himself ended by some half-assed guerrillas. Nate's smile was bitter. Should have known he was playing a deeper game. I hired the private investigator through a Craigslist ad, paying cash for discretion. Tommy Kowalski was ex-police, divorced, and desperate enough to take jobs without asking too many questions. He had thinning hair and coffee breath, but his references checked out. "Find everything you can about this man," I said, sliding him the photo Nate had shown me. "Real name is Wyatt Briggs, but he's using Sam Davis now. Based in Idaho. What kind of everything? Addresses, associates, financial records, daily routines. I want to know what he eats for breakfast." Tommy studied the photo. "This going to be legal?" "Information gathering." "Nothing more." "Uh-huh." He pocketed the photo. "My rate is $500 a day plus expenses. I'll need $2,000 up front." I counted out the money from the envelope I'd brought, cash from the emergency fund Rachel didn't know about. "How long?" "Give me a week." He called me 6 days later. "Your boy's been busy," Tommy said. "Runs a place called Tactical Solutions, Inc., outside Boise. Trains private security, corporate types, some militia groups. Clean on paper, but there's weird money flowing through the business, shell companies, overseas accounts." "What else?" "Lives alone in a cabin 10 miles from the compound. Drives a black Ford F-150, Idaho plates, Charlie Echo 742. Has a girlfriend in town, blonde, maybe 30, works at a bank. My grip tightened on the phone. Blonde? Yeah. Why? Nothing. Keep going. He's got a concealed carry permit under the Davis name, registered to an address in Meridian. Also found military records showing he was discharged honorably 3 years ago. Purple Heart, Bronze Star, the works. All lies. Beautiful, official lies. I need surveillance photos, I said. Daily routine, who he meets with, where he goes. That's going to cost extra. Name your price. Rachel found me copying files from her burner phone at 2 in the morning. I'd found the device taped under her car's passenger seat, a cheap prepaid Nokia she thought I'd never discover. The contacts list was small but telling. Sam Davis, unknown, and handler. What the heck are you doing? I looked up to find her standing in the garage doorway wearing a bathrobe and fury. Her eyes were wild, desperate. Learning the truth, I said, holding up the phone. Want to explain why you have a burner with Wyatt's number in it? I don't know what you're talking about. Sam Davis, Idaho number. Ring any bells? The color drained from her face. Cal, I can explain. Explain what? That you've been in contact with a man who's supposed to be dead? That you've been feeding him information about me, about my missions? It's not like that. Then what is it like, Rachel? I stood up, still holding the phone. What's it like to be married to a traitor? She lunged at me then, nails raking across my face. I grabbed her wrists, pinned her against the garage wall. She was breathing hard, tears streaming down her cheeks. You don't understand, she gasped. He said he'd protect us. After what happened in Serbia, he said people would come after you, after me and Jesse. So you helped him fake his death? I helped him survive. She twisted in my grip, trying to break free. You think I wanted this? You think I wanted to live with this secret? You seem to be managing just fine. Her laugh was bitter, broken. You have no idea what I've been managing, no idea what I've sacrificed. Enlighten me. You, she whispered. I sacrificed you. Every day for 3 years, watching you grieve for him, knowing he was alive. Knowing that if you ever found out, I'd what? End him? End us all. The garage door opened behind us. Jessie stood there in her pajamas, taking in the scene, her mother pinned against the wall, her not father holding evidence of betrayal. Mom? Rachel sagged in my grip. Go back inside, honey. But Jessie didn't move. She just stared at us with those green eyes, and I saw something in them that chilled me to the bone. Not fear, not surprise, satisfaction. About time, she said, then turned and walked back into the house. The tactical compound sat in a valley surrounded by pine trees and paranoia. I'd been watching it for 3 days from a ridge half a mile away, cataloging routines and weaknesses. Wyatt, Sam Davis, arrived every morning at 0800, left around 1700. The compound had motion sensors, cameras, and at least 6 armed guards, but it also had blind spots. I moved in at 0200, dressed in black and carrying enough C4 to level a city block. The first guard never saw me coming. Neither did the second. I planted charges on the generator, the communications array, and the main building's support beams. Then I waited in the shadows for Wyatt to arrive. He looked good for a dead man. The beard was new, and he'd put on weight, but those were the same blue eyes that had watched Rachel laugh in that wedding photo. I let him get inside before I triggered the charges. The explosions lit up the valley like the 4th of July. Emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red. Guards ran in all directions, shouting orders that no one could hear over the ringing in their ears. I found Wyatt in his office, trying to stuff files into a briefcase. He spun around when I kicked in the door, reaching for a pistol on his desk. Hello, brother, I said. His hand froze on the tool. Cal, surprised to see me. I can explain. I'm sure you can. You always work good with words. I stepped into the office, closing the door behind me. Tell me about Rachel. His face went pale. Cal, listen. Tell me about my daughter. The daughter who isn't mine? She never meant for you to... I hit him before he could finish the sentence, a straight right that dropped him to his knees. 18 years, I said. 18 years I raised another man's child, thinking she was mine. 18 years I trusted you, loved you like a brother. I never wanted... I kicked him in the ribs, felt something crack. What you wanted doesn't matter anymore. Wyatt tried to crawl away, but there was nowhere to go. I grabbed him by the shirt, hauled him to his feet, then threw him against the filing cabinet. His head bounced off the metal with a sound like a melon dropping. The worst part, I said, is that I could have lived with it. The affair, the child, even the betrayal. But you made me grieve for you. You made me carry that guilt, thinking I left you to die in those woods. I had to. You had to what? Disappear? Start a new life with stolen money and my wife's secrets? I backhanded him across the face, splitting his lip. You could have just left. Could have taken Rachel and Jesse and disappeared. But you had to torture me first. Wyatt slumped against the filing cabinet, barely conscious. Please, he whispered. No. I zip-tied his hands behind his back, then dragged him to his desk chair. His computer was still running, password-protected files displayed on the screen. I typed in Rachel's birthday, the same password she used for everything. The files opened like a flower blooming in heck. Bank records showing transfers from offshore accounts, photos of tools shipments, names and addresses of foreign contacts, email threads discussing classified military operations. Everything Milan had told me was true. Wyatt wasn't just a deserter. He was a traitor who'd been selling secrets for years. I copied everything to a thumb drive, then sent the files to 3 email addresses: the FBI's criminal division, the Washington Post's investigative desk, and Wyatt's former commanding officer. There, I said, ejecting the drive. Now everyone knows what you really are. Wyatt's eyes were swollen shut, but he was still breathing, still alive to face what was coming. I left him there, tied to his chair, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes. By the time the authorities arrived, I was already gone, driving through the Idaho darkness toward home. The arrest happened on a Tuesday. I was drinking coffee in my kitchen when I saw the FBI vehicles pull up outside Rachel's office building on the morning news. They let her out in handcuffs, a gray blazer thrown over her orange jumpsuit. Wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy to aid a fugitive, the reporter said. Rachel Dawson, 42, is accused of helping her husband's former military colleague fake his death and assume a false identity. I turned off the TV and finished my coffee. Jesse was staying with Rachel's sister Karen in Denver, at least until the trial. I'd packed her belongings the night before: clothes, books, the stuffed elephant she'd had since she was 3. Everything fit in 2 suitcases. When I dropped them off, Karen barely looked at me. She doesn't want to see you, she said, standing in her doorway like a guard. That's fine. Is it? Because Jesse's pretty messed up right now. Her mother's in jail, her father. Karen caught herself. The man she thought was her father just destroyed her entire family. I didn't destroy anything. I just stopped pretending it existed. That's a heck of a way to look at it. Maybe it was. But it was the only way that let me sleep at night. I drove home through streets that looked the same but felt different. The house was quiet, empty of the lies that had filled it for so many years. I sat in my recliner and waited for the phone to ring. It did, eventually. Karen's number on the caller ID. She wants to talk to you, Karen said. A pause, then Jesse's voice. Older now, harder. You happy now? She asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. No, I said finally. But I'm not angry anymore. That's something, I guess. Another pause. I could hear voices in the background, Karen talking to someone. Cal? Yeah. For what it's worth, I never hated you. I was just angry about a lot of things. I know. Do you? Because sometimes I think you forgot that none of this was my fault either. I didn't ask to be born into your marriage. I didn't ask for any of this. She was right. But right didn't fix anything. What happens now? She asked. I don't know. That's honest, at least. I heard her talking to someone else. Then she came back on the line. I have to go. Aunt Karen's making dinner. Jesse? Yeah? Take care of yourself. Always do. The line went dead. I set the phone on the table beside my chair and looked around the empty house. Tomorrow, I'd start looking for a smaller place, somewhere without ghosts in every room. But tonight, I sat in the darkness and remembered what it felt like to be happy. Before the photo in Wyatt's wallet, before the DNA test, before I learned that love could be just another word for lying. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, carrying someone else's emergency through the Colorado night. I closed my eyes and listened until they faded into silence, then opened them to find myself alone, which was exactly where I belonged. Epilogue. 6 months later, I received a newspaper clipping in the mail. No return address, no note. Just a small article from the Idaho Statesman about a federal trial in Boise. Wyatt Briggs, aka Sam Davis, had been sentenced to 25 years in federal prison for treason, arms trafficking, and conspiracy. The article mentioned that he'd been beaten severely by unknown assailants before his arrest, but had recovered enough to stand trial. It also mentioned that his girlfriend, a bank employee named Jennifer Walsh, had been arrested for money laundering. I folded the clipping carefully and put it in my wallet, next to a new photo, one of me alone, taken at the Grand Canyon last month. My first vacation in 20 years. The house sold in July. I moved to a cabin outside Durango, close to nothing and no one. I bought a dog, a German Shepherd mix named Ranger, who didn't care about my past or my mistakes. Sometimes I got emails from Karen, updates about Jessie. She was doing well in school, had a boyfriend, was thinking about college. The updates were brief, clinical, but they told me what I needed to know. She was surviving. Rachel's trial had been postponed twice, but her lawyer expected a plea deal. Minimum security, maybe 18 months. She'd be out before Jessie graduated high school. I tried not to think about what would happen then. Whether Jessie would visit her mother, whether they'd rebuild their relationship, whether either of them would ever forgive me for burning down their world. But forgiveness was a luxury I couldn't afford, not anymore. On cold nights, when the wind howled through the pines and Ranger pressed against my legs for warmth, I sometimes thought about that forest in Serbia, about the choice I'd made to leave Wyatt behind, about the sound of his voice calling my name. I'd made the right decision, but for the wrong reasons. That was the thing I couldn't escape, couldn't forgive myself for. I'd been willing to let my best friend die, not because he was a traitor, but because he'd stolen something that was never really mine to begin with. But maybe that was justice. Maybe that was what real justice looked like. Messy, imperfect, leaving everyone damaged in different ways. Or maybe I was just telling myself stories to make the loneliness bearable. Either way, I was done pretending. Done lying to myself about love, loyalty, family. Done believing in anything except the weight of my rifle and the sound of my own breathing in the dark. The fire in the cabin's fireplace had burned down to embers, casting dancing shadows on the log walls. I added another piece of wood, watched the flames leap higher. Ranger lifted his head, ears pricked at some sound only he could hear. Then he settled back down, content that whatever was out there wasn't a threat. I envied him that certainty, that ability to trust his instincts without question, to act without regret. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows. I checked the locks one more time, turned off the lights, and headed for bed. Tomorrow I'd drive into town for supplies, maybe stop at the diner for coffee and conversation with people who didn't know my story. But tonight I'd sleep the dreamless sleep of a man who'd finally stopped running from the truth. Even if the truth had burned everything else to ash. Outside, snow began to fall, covering the world in white. By morning, all the old tracks would be gone, buried under fresh powder. A clean slate, blank and perfect. I closed my eyes and listened to the silence, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound like screaming. It sounded like peace.